Good morning, students. My name is Dr. Ajibola Surakat from the Department of Philosophy on Labisi Banjo University. I am here to continue with our topic on. I'm here to continue with our topics on GST212, philosophy, logic, and human existence. Today, we shall be looking at formal and informal fallacies. That's our topic for today. Formal and informal fallacies. Now, what is fallacy? At least people have been talking about fallacy. What is fallacy? Fallacy can be regarded as an error in reasoning. An error in reasoning. And without taking a close look at it, fallacious argument may seem to be convincing and sound if you don't give it a critical look. Fallacious statements or arguments will look convincing and sound. Remember, we did sound argument, valid, invalid, sound, and unsound argument. So when an argument is sound, it means that such an argument has the following characteristics. 1, the premises are true. 2, the conclusion is true. And 3, it is valid. So there are some fallacious arguments that without taking a critical look at it, you will not know that they are fallacious because they are convincing and looks very sound. So that's why we want to examine some fallacious argument or statement in this topic. Now, for the purpose of this topic, we are going to classify fallacies into two broad areas, and that is formal and informal fallacies. So, fallacy is going to be looked at from two broad areas, formal and informal fallacies. Now, what is formal fallacies? A formal fallacy can be viewed as an error in reasoning which is based solely on the form, the structure, rather than the content of the argument. It is based on the form or the structure of the argument rather than the content of the argument. So there are two things. An argument may be fallacious structurally, and the content of an argument may equally be fallacious. May equally be fallacious. So now, when we talk of formal fallacy, in this formal fallacy, it is the structure or the form of that argument that is fallacious and not the content. So this means that it is established structure that is faulty. It is the established structure that is faulty. The established structure is faulty. So, but another way of putting it is that a formal fallacy is committed when some formal rules or logic are either ignored or violated. When the rules are either ignored or violated. Now, remember when we were treating types of arguments, and under types of deductive argument, we said that there are some that are formulated according to the rules of inference. So any fallacy that are formulated according to the rules of inference are formal fallacies. So under formal fallacies, we are going to look at just 2 or 3 of some of the fallacious arguments. So where we have most work to do is on informal fallacies. But briefly, I will take you through some of the rules that are formulated according to the laws of inference that are fallacious. So now we are going to look at three of such arguments. We are going to look at three of such arguments. Now, number one, we are going to look at fallacy of affirming the consequence. Fallacy of affirming the consequence. That's number one. Number two, we are going to look at fallacy of denying the antecedent. Remember, when we treated conditional statement, we said conditional statement has antecedent and consequent. So we are going to look at the structure of those arguments now and see how they are fallacious. So we are going to see how they are fallacious. And number three is fallacy of four terms. Fallacy of four terms. So these three are what we are going to consider under formal fallacies. Under formal fallacies, these are what we are going to consider. Now, fallacy of affirming the consequence. Now, there is a rule of inference. There is a rule of inference known as modus ponens. Modus ponens. It's a rule of inference. This rule of inference is known as modus ponens. So, the structure of modus ponens, that is P-O-N-E-N-S, modus, M-O-D-U-S. So, modus ponens. So, the structure of modus ponens is the accepted structure. Is the accepted structure of one of the inference. Now, modus ponens by the structure will say that, let me use a simple example. If it rains, then the ground is wet. Now, that is my number one premise. If it rains, then the ground is wet. My number two premise will now be it rains. It rains. And my conclusion will be, therefore, the ground is wet. Now, that is the normal structure of modus ponens. That's the normal structure. So, but however, there may be a structure like this fallacy of affirming the consequent. Now, what we are saying here is that instead of affirming the antecedent as your second premise, you are affirming the consequent as your second premise, which is wrong. So, under fallacy of affirming the consequent, what it means is that you have run contrary to the rule of modus ponens. So, under modus ponens, the structure is, like I said, is if it rains, then the ground is wet. Or let me say, if it rains, then the ground will be wet. B, that is premise 2. It rains. You are affirming that it rains. Then what follows will be your conclusion that the ground is wet. So that is modus ponens. So now, if we now run contrary to that modus ponens, it means that we have violated the rule guiding modus ponens. So if we now say if it rains, then the ground will be wet. They will now say the ground is wet, therefore it rains. Now, when you look at it, it is logically convincing as well. It is logically convincing when you look at the structure. If it rains, then the ground will be wet. My premise 2, it rains. My promise 2, the ground is wet, therefore it rains. But structurally, it is wrong. Because 1, the ground may be wet without rain. So once you affirm your consequence as your second premise, it does not guarantee the conclusion, but it is logically persuasive. It is logically persuasive. So that is what we call fallacy of affirming the consequence. So meaning that it runs contrary to the rule of modus ponens. It runs contrary to the rules of modus ponens. So let me just define it. So fallacy of affirming the consequent. This fallacy occurs or is committed when the rule of affirming the antecedent or modus ponens that we have previously talked about is violated. When it's violated. So, meaning that in this fallacy, the first premise is a material conditional statement, and that is if it rains, then the ground will be wet. It's a material conditional. It's a conditional statement, as we have discussed earlier. So now that is premise one. Now premise two. Premise two is that it rains. And conclusion is that therefore the ground is wet. That is the structure of modus ponens. But when we now affirm the consequent instead of antecedent first, then we have run contrary to the rule of modus ponens. So we have run contrary to the rule of modus ponens. So that is that about that. Now the second one is fallacy of denying the antecedent. Fallacy of denying the antecedent. This fallacy is also part of the fallacy of rules of the fallacy that is attached to rules of inference. Fallacy attached to rules of inference. So now, in this fallacy, the fallacy will occur when the rule of denying the consequence or modus tollens is violated. Rule of denying the consequence or modus tollens is violated. Modus tollens, 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 normal modus, is violated when it is violated. So now, it is also a material conditional statement. The difference between this fallacy and that of modus ponens is that in modus ponens, you have to affirm the antecedent first before conclusion. In modus tollens, you have to deny the antecedent first. You have to deny the consequent first before denying the antecedent. So, this fallacy is such that from the first premise, which is a material conditional statement or conditional statement, as the rule of modus tollens, the antecedent is denied. The antecedent is denied instead of the consequent. So meaning that we first deny the antecedent instead of the consequent. We need to deny the consequent first before we deny the antecedent. So that is just the difference between these two. Now, for instance, now let me give you an instance. Let me give you an instance. Excuse me. Now, if John is a father, then John is a man. If Jones is a father, then Jones is a man. Now, and I said my second premise, John is not a father. John is not a father, meaning that I am denying the antecedent. And therefore, my conclusion, John is not a man. It is logically persuasive, but by the structure, it is wrong. Because it runs contrary to the structure of modus tollens. It runs contrary to the structure of modus tollens. The structure of modus tollens is that if John is a father, then John is a man. Now, your premise 2 is going to be John is not a man. Before you can now say John is not a father. So you have to say John Jones is not a man. You have to deny the antecedent first. You have to deny the antecedent first. So once you deny the antecedent first, that Joan is not a no. Sorry, please. Once you deny the antecedent, you are still running contrary to the rule of modus tollens. Now, you need to deny the consequent before you can now affirm that John is not a father. But if you first deny the antecedent before you now affirm the consequent as a conclusion, the structure is strong. The structure is strong. It violates the rule of modus tollens. So the normal structure of modus tollens is that if John is a father, then John is a man. Now, we are going to deny the consequent. Now, John is not a man. Our conclusion, therefore, John is not a father. So that is the normal structure. So anything contrary to this structure, it is strong. And that is why fallacy of deny the antecedent is contrary to the structure of modus tollens. If John is a father, then John is a man. Now, if I now say John is not a father, that means I am denying the antecedent first. Therefore, John is not a man. Here, it shows that the fallacy committed here is known as fallacy of denying the antecedent. Fallacy of denying the antecedent. Now, the third one we are going to consider is what we call fallacy of four terms. Fallacy of four terms. In logic, there is something we call hypothetical syllogism. We call it hypothetical syllogism or syllogism. In syllogism has two premises and a conclusion. It has two premises and a conclusion. Now, each of the proposition will carry two terms. Each of the propositions will carry two terms. Now, meaning that from proposition 1, which is your premise 1, proposition 2, which is your premise 2, and proposition 3, which is your conclusion, we have 6 terms. But these 6 terms occur, each of the terms occur twice. That is why we have 6. So meaning that we have 3 terms. Because it occurs twice, that is why we have 6 terms. But the 6 terms is just 3 terms, not 6. So when you now violate this categorical syllogism, the rule guiding this categorical syllogism, instead of having 3 terms and you are having 4 terms, the fallacy is that of fallacy of 4 terms. So in any categorical syllogism, for instance now, let me use all human beings are mortal. All human beings are mortal. All mortals are Nigerians. All human beings are mortal. All mortals are Nigerian. Therefore, all Nigerians are mortal. So you discover that when you write it down, each of these, in premise 1, we have 2 terms. Premise 2, we have 2 terms. Premise 3, we have 2 terms. But each of the terms features twice. That is why it is 3, because a term cannot represent 2 things. A term stands for just one thing. It has just one meaning. All human beings are mortal. All mortals are Nigerian. Therefore, all Nigerians are mortal. So each is 2 in each of the propositions. So now, where we now have 4 terms, then it means we have committed fallacy of four cause or four terms. We have committed fallacy of four terms. Now, for instance, some birds are animals, premise one. Some birds are animal, premise one. Premise two, all birds are egg layers. Therefore, some egg layers are living things. So when you look at it now, we are having four terms. We have birds, we have animals, we have egg layers, and we have living things. So meaning that we have violated the rule of fallacy of four terms. The fallacy of four terms means that a categorical syllogism which has two premises and a conclusion, and in which two terms occur in each of the premises, including conclusion. So, including conclusion. So, meaning that we now have, because each of the terms will occur twice in the argument. Each of the terms will occur twice in the argument. So, twice, two, 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 that is three. So, meaning that we have three terms. But where we have four terms, we have committed fallacy of four terms. That has been the example for that. Now, let us go to informal fallacies. So that is where we have most of the work to do. Informal fallacies. Now, what is informal fallacy? We have talked about formal fallacy, and we said that formal fallacy is an error in reasoning that is based on the form or the structure of the argument. So when you see all the three arguments that we have given, you can see that it is the structure that are faulty. It is their structure that are faulty, not the content, not the meaning. But the structure is what is faulty. Structurally, it is defective. So that is for formal fallacies. Now for informal fallacy. An informal fallacy is an error in reasoning which an individual may fall into either because of his or her carelessness, coupled with coupled with inattention or less attention, or the person is being misguided by language problems. So when the person is misled by language problem, probably did not understand the language. That one is possible. So when we are talking about informal fallacy, we are talking about error in reasoning, which anybody may fall into, either because that person is careless, or the person is inattentive, or not paying much attention to the argument, or the person is being misled by language problems. So here now you can see that it is not the structure or the form that is faulty. It is the interpretation, the meaning that we have problem with. So informal fallacies rest on the content of the argument. It rests on the content of the argument. That's informal fallacies. The first one, that is formal fallacy, rests on the form or structure, while this one rests on the content or the meaning of the argument. So informal fallacies rest on the meaning or the content of the argument, while formal fallacy rests on the form or the structure of the argument. Though informal fallacy may look or may sound, correct or incorrect, or it may sound correct. Let me use that word. It may sound correct to you because they are psychologically persuasive. That is why it will sound correct, because you are not paying much attention, or you are being misled by language problem, or you don't understand the content of the argument. So it is not the structure this time around or the form. So that is what we term as informal fallacies. That's what we term as informal fallacies. Now, under informal fallacies, we are going to look at four major fallacies. And under each of these four major fallacies, we have sub fallacies under them. We have sub fallacies. So informal fallacies can be divided into four major groups. And each of these groups is having their own sub fallacies. It's having their own sub fallacies. So under it, the first division is fallacy of ambiguity. Fallacy of ambiguity. Ambiguity, ambiguous language, ambiguous argument. Argument that is not clear. Argument that is not straightforward. Argument whose meaning can be interpreted to mean this or to mean that. So that is fallacy of ambiguity. And secondly, we have fallacies of relevance. Fallacies of relevance. Relevance is the argument relevance to the conclusion, the premises. What is the relevance of the premises to the conclusion? That is what we want to look at that. So, to what extent is the argument supporting the conclusion or the premises supporting the conclusion? To what extent are the premises supporting the conclusion? So we now have the third one, fallacy of presumption. When you presume, when you are presuming. So we have a number of fallacies under that. We are actually going to look at it. And the last one is fallacy of weak induction. Weak induction. Under inductive argument, we said inductive argument can be weak or strong, bad or good. This is based on the number of observations. So it is the number of observations that make it to be strong or weak. So we are going to look at that. Now, under fallacies of ambiguity, we are going to look at 5 other fallacies. The fallacy of ambiguity is the major term of it. Then under it, we have additional 5 other fallacies that we are going to look at. Number 1 is fallacy of equivocation. When you equivocate a word, when you use a word in different places to mean different things, you are using just one word like 3 or 4 times, and where the features, they have different meaning. That is fallacy of equivocation. We are going to look at fallacy of amphiboly. Fallacy of amphiboly, when you use fake word, fake phrase or word. We call it amphiboly. Pronunciation Amphiboly. Fallacy of amphiboly. Then under it, we are going to look at fallacy of composition. Fallacy of composition. And again, we are going to look at fallacy of division. And lastly, under it, we will look at fallacy of assent. Now, let's quickly rush through this because of our time. Now, what is fallacy of ambiguity? What is fallacies of ambiguity? These are fallacies that occur because little or no attention is paid to the meaning of words in arguments. Little or no attention is paid to the meaning of words in arguments. Meaning changes is a common feature of this fallacy. That is, the meaning changes from one place to another. It is not straightforward. Anything ambiguity is not straightforward. It's confusing. And that's why in philosophy, we don't allow vagueness and ambiguity in our language. We make things to be precise so that they will not have different interpretations. So any word you are going to choose must be a choice word that will not have different meaning. So that is what fallacy of ambiguity is. Now, what is fallacy of equivocation under the fallacy of ambiguity? equivocation, using a word to feature two or three times, and each place where they feature, they mean different things. So this fallacy occurs when a word or phrase which features more than one in an argument or statement has more than one meaning. When you have more than one meaning, and we are not clear about the intended meaning. So which of them, which meaning do you actually want to attribute or attach to the word or the phrase? So that is now an example. Let me give you an example as well. I have it here. Now, the boy with red book, the boy with red book has been brought to book because he failed to book the passenger for their trip. The boy with red book has been brought to book because he failed to book the passengers for their trip. When you look at it, the word book appears in three places, and each place it appears, it has different meaning. One, book as a reading or writing material. Two, as a punishment. Three, as a record keeping. When you look at that. So that means when you are using a word and that word features two or three times, and each time it features or each place it features, it has different meaning. That's what we call fallacy of equivocation. Now, to fallacy of amphiboly, this fallacy occurs in an argument which contains some fake phrase or word, fake, that the meaning is not clear. When some phrase or word in an argument is not clear, it is fake, the meaning of the argument itself will be indeterminate. It will be indeterminate. That's why we call it amphibolous. It contains fake phrase or fake word. For instance, an example: John slapped Peter, so James slapped him. John slapped Peter, then James slapped him. It is not clear who actually did James slap. So it's either John slapped Peter, so James slapped John. But when you look at it now, it is the way it is. It's like if I say, okay, he took the egg out of the glass cup and broke it. Broke what? Is it the glass cup he broke, or the egg? He took the egg out of the glass cup and broke it. So it's not clear which of them is he referring to. Is it the glass cup or the egg? This is what we refer to as fallacy of amphiboly. Now, the third one under it is fallacy of composition. Fallacy of composition. The fallacy is committed when, in an argument, the attribute or features of individual or part are assigned to a group or whole, respectively. Fallacy of composition. That is, let me use this example for this fallacy of composition. In a class of 50, I have been able to single out about 7 or 10 people as being brilliant. You know, they are individual I've singled out. Now, I have now come to the conclusion that all the class are brilliant. I am attributing the attributes, the attribute of an individual or the features of an individual to everybody, which is not supposed to be so. In that class of 50, not everybody will be brilliant. But because I've studied 2, 4, 5, 6, 7 people in that class, and I said, oh, these people are pretty brilliant. And I now say that the whole class is brilliant. Or the old students are brilliant in that class. So by saying that, I have committed fallacy of composition. I've committed fallacy of composition because I have attributed fallacy of individuals to the group. Then the next one is fallacy of division, which is directly the opposite of fallacy of composition. Fallacy of division, which is directly the opposite of fallacy of composition. Now, this fallacy is just directly opposite because here you are taking what belongs to a group to an individual. The first one, composition, is from individual, attributes or features of individual to a group. But in division, attribute of group to individual. Now, after an exam, all the class performed brilliantly well. So, and I single out some people and say, okay, they are brilliant. In that fallacy, it is fallacy of division because you are taking what belongs to a group to individual. And fallacy of composition from individual to group. Then the last one that we are going to stop for today is fallacy of accent. Accent, 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 fallacy of accent. This fallacy occurs as a result of the way in which some words are emphasized. In which some words are emphasized or stressed in an argument. Now, this fallacy of accent, in most cases, newspaper or journalists, they make use of it to attract customers to buy. When you look at the heading, when you look, they can say Obasanjo to be buried tomorrow. You might be wondering, which Obasanjo is Obasanjo dead? Now, by the time you buy the paper now and started reading, you discover that there's another person behind Obasanjo that has been used as a caption to attract you to buy it. So the content is different. When you begin to read it, now discover that the content is quite different from the heading. Because your initial thought will be that Obasanjo is to be buried. Has he died? Is he dead? Or something like that. So when you begin to question yourself on it, because already you have been attracted by that headline. So that is what we mean by fallacy of accent. It is to attract you to buy. And by the time you start reading it, so it is mostly used by journalists and newspapers to attract people to buy. For another example, Nigeria at war with Ghana over who lived Mandela's Cup. Nigeria at war with Ghana over who lived Mandela Cup. Now, the war is not a war where they will be using weapons against each other, but it is just a pitch war where they display their football quality on the pitch. But when you see it at times, people may not actually understand the meaning and then try to buy it. You will see that by the time you are reading so many things, discover that the content is quite far different from the headings. So this is what we refer to as fallacy of accent. So we are going to stop there. By next week, we start with fallacy of relevance. Under this fallacy of relevance, there are some names, there are some Greek names that you need to understand and know offhand. So we'll do that by next week by the grace of God. So we'll start from appeal to force with the Latin word argumentum ad baculum. So we start from that. Appeal to pity, appeal to force, and others like that. Appeal to popular feeling. All of them have their Latin words. So we have to understand the Latin words as attached to a particular appeal. So that is where we're going to stop for today. Thank you. God bless you. We'll meet next week.